welcome to my new occasional podcast that I call 1v1 with guest Asa this week. We've got a topic, maybe two, something that come up off the top of my head or whatever comes up with us this week. Welcome, Asa. Welcome back. It's good to have you back on the show. It's been a minute.
Thanks so much. It's been a few minutes. I've done your Saturday show a couple of times. Is this an Xbox show, Riskit?
No, this is just a whatever talking about gaming type show, I think. I don't think it's Xboxy.
Cool. Even
though I'm an Xbox guy. I don't know, are you an Xbox guy? What would you consider yourself?
That's an opening question that will run for no time at all. I play everything.
Except for the Switch.
I consider, apart from the Switch, there's a line of like really casual experiences all the way up to the most hardcore of the most hardcore experiences. I'm like this end of the line. So consoles are as casual as I get, right the way up to strapping into my treadmill and running around in virtual reality. Anything on the casual line of that, the mobiles and the browser games, no, you're all right. Would you
call that hardcore? Because I mean, if you guys have not watched Asa on the treadmill, it's pretty awesome. And he gets into it. You get, especially when you're playing Elder Scrolls. I love it.
Elder Scrolls and Resident Evil, freaking terrifying. Yeah, I call because people I don't typically throw around terms like casual gamer and hardcore and all the rest of it. But if I want to be really pedantic, then I call everybody else casual. Nobody can say that they're hardcore next to what I'm doing.
Yeah, look, I did think about, though, getting one of those things. We were talking about it when I was actually in England. I was trying to get the gauge on what that would cost. But then I found out they have a weight limit, and that's a problem for me.
I didn't know that.
Well, I think you said it was 130 kilos, and if that gives you any idea. Anyway, let's jump into the topic. And the topic is, you guys had a show, I believe it was, you guys have it on my Sunday night. Game On Daily, if you guys haven't checked it out, links in the description. Also, the link in the description for Ace's channel if you want to check out him destroying Elder Scrolls beasts, men, women, some children.
Dragons. It doesn't let you kill many of the children, but chickens, absolutely.
Chickens, anything like that. If you want to see that, jump down there, hit the link in the description. And while you're there, hit the like button if you're flipping out to that. So you mentioned on that show that you didn't put much stock in the tools. Now, if you'd said that earlier in the generation, and have you said it earlier? If you'd said that
absolutely,
earlier,
yes.
If you'd said that
I'm
earlier,
very consistent.
You are consistent, if nothing else. So I didn't call you.
I changed my mind. Yeah,
I've been calling Asa the Vulcan sniper for the longest time. Live long and prosper. Anyway, so you said you didn't put much stock in the tools. You never have, and you've turned out to be right.
Have I?
Oh, I think you have, but we're starting. That's something I want to get into. I think we're starting to see some sort of implementation, and the reasons as to why there's no implementation. We could probably get into that as well. But why didn't you put much stock in the tools? Because if you bought into the hype, and I'm going to be honest, I did. I bought into the hype. I checked out the RDNA2. I watched all the videos. I was like, oh my God, mesh shaders look amazing. Where are they? This looks amazing. Velocity architecture. Woohoo! This is going to be the gen. We're going to get 8K ray tracing. No, I didn't think that. But, I definitely thought we're going to get a lot more than we've gotten. But going back to the earlier on, why didn't you put stock in those tools?
It's more, so Xbox did very well in one respect, in that they've been very, very transparent about what their hardware is and what it should be able to do. They've given people too much information, I think. So with good intent, they've been very transparent and they've let everybody know what all of these features are. And in theory, what they do for games. And they've given that to an audience that doesn't make games and has run away with certain details and made them a much bigger deal than they are. Like one of them, they did this whole charade around like, oh, ours is the only console that's full RDNA2. And you've seen that burn through the community for like ever since they said it, and it doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't mean a thing. Marketing overstepped the mark and let people get a little bit carried away. And I said at the time, as soon as they were talking about that means very little. It means very little. And I stand by that.
Why does it mean very little? So if we're talking full DNA, well, let's cut it back to what PlayStation maybe doesn't have. So what don't they have that Xbox does have?
Good question, Riskit. You tell me.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's very difficult to know for sure because Sony are much less transparent than Microsoft, and they've not really gone into anywhere near as much detail on what their box can do.
That's true. The only thing
that AMD do come out and say it's also RDNA2. So what's the big differentiator that Microsoft were actually getting at when they said we're the only one that's full RDNA2? What does that mean?
Well, look, I do. The only thing I do know for 110% sure, and I've yet to be able to get tech heads to explain this to me in a way that I can understand it. However, I do know that's not a reflection on them. It's probably a reflection on me. That's why Ace is laughing. But the reason,
I don't know either.
The difference, I think, is in the mesh shaders. But we just haven't seen mesh shaders. So from what I've been told, the only thing that I can differentiate is that PlayStation uses old tech or less mesh shaders, a lot less. I think
what do mesh shaders look like, Riskit? If I've got it on my screen, what does a mesh shader look like?
It looks like a shader that shades things. It's like a big marker. I think it's a texter. I'm pretty sure if you can imagine like a crayon, right? Apparently what it does is pre-shade stuff. I normally have this stuff up on screen, but as it's conversational, I like to go off the top of my head. But mesh shaders can save a ridiculous amount of compute units and save the GPU as well from having to do a lot of work, saving horsepower, giving you overhead. Very basically, extremely layman, right? So that's the only thing that I know that's better. And then velocity architecture.
Performance saving, though, essentially, when you talk about mesh shaders and these things that people want to see, it's not something that any of us would be able to look at a game and say, yes, that's there, or no, that isn't, right? It's performance.
Well, I don't know if they could get to a point where they could look. This is what I expected from the generation, and I'd be interested to know exactly what you expected from this generation. I mean, if you look up at this box over here, it says 8K up there. You can't see it; it's just cut out, so it says 8K. No, I didn't expect 8K. I wasn't unrealistic, but what I did expect to see was at least 1440p ray tracing. I thought that would be a possibility with 60 frames a second, right? I thought that would be a possibility. No, because one didn't have full RDNA. But this one, look, PlayStation 5 is saying it could do 8K. So yeah, I did expect it from both consoles. The thing is, we don't know what the API is in the PS5 because they don't tell you anything. They really don't. They've given us a rough, brief overview of what they have and how it works. People have pulled it apart though. I've seen like tech rip downs. Not that I would understand them. So. But
so just to look back there, so RDNA2, what do you think defines RDNA2? What's new in that kind of generation of AMD technology, signature feature of RDNA2?
Oh, sorry, hang on a minute.
wait. I've got no logo and it's got some wine.
So. What do I think defines it? Well, like I said, the only difference is the mesh shaders. I think
that's the difference between the consoles. But RDNA2 as a whole, because I can give you an answer, like from my perspective, from what I've seen as a predominantly PC kind of gamer.
Right. Yeah. So I know the cache, the Infinity cache is extremely important for PC gaming, but not for you don't have it in the console. So technically, that's not full RDNA. But yeah, go ahead. So
the kind of signatures that you'd expect. Like looking at that technology and looking at the range of graphics cards that are RDNA2, there's two of them. One of them is ray tracing. So RDNA1 had no ray tracing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is that it clocks a hell of a lot higher than RDNA1 did. And these are the signature features. That's what I look at when I see RDNA2 card. It's going to clock at about 2,000 as opposed to 1,400 in the previous generation or whatever it was. And there's a range because all of these cards are different. And it's going to be able to do not very well, not as good as an NVIDIA card, but it's going to have some degree of ray tracing included. And for whatever reason that I cannot give you, Xbox has one of those two signature features.
Right, but not two. Well, not two that we've seen yet.
Not two at all whatsoever. I don't know why they've clocked it conservatively, but it has relatively conservative clocks. And there is more to RDNA2. And the suite of tools that Microsoft were talking about when they made that claim, they had their big marketing thing with AMD, and there was a suite of like 4 or 5 DirectX or direct library tools, which are going to be unique to Xbox because Xbox are going to be the only ones, Xbox and PC are the only ones using the direct library by default because it's Microsoft's library. So it was a bit of a misleading bit of a misleading statement, the full RDNA2 thing for me, and it created this narrative. And there's someone in your chat saying it right now. The PlayStation 5 isn't full RDNA2. What's it missing, Russian? Mesh shaders? Is that what we're getting at? PlayStation 5 doesn't count as RDNA2 because this feature that maybe gives you a little bit of performance, we don't know how much, we don't know if we've seen it or if we haven't.
Oh, it has been benchmarked, and it has given quite a bit of a performance.
Lots of things are benchmarked. Do you remember VRS?
Yes.
Variable rate shading.
Yes.
Do you remember the headline performance gain for it?
Yes. Especially, yes. Yes, stop it. Xbox is great. No. Look, you're absolutely right.
Because I want to just really quickly, because the headline for it, the thing that all the articles ran with was this is a 15% gain in performance.
Yes, exactly.
The very same document, if you read through it, said you can actually expect more like 1% gain if you use it, setting the expectation for developers. Some specific ideal scenarios is a 15% performance gain. Actually use it in your game. So long as you've already got a high enough resolution, you might get like a percentage or two performance improvement. And that, if you're a developer and a gamer, that's not a trivial amount. Like all of these features that make up graphics cards for the last 20, 30 years give you performance gains like this, and they all stack up and they all mean something. But they do not mean that your console is better than somebody else's.
Definitely is, though.
You can have it for whatever other reasons you want. I'm just not letting you have that one.
Look, absolutely, and you're right, because 1% on top of 1% on top of 1% with all these tools, if they were being implemented, would make a hell of a difference, right? You know, even a 5% gain gives you, if you want to translate it, I'm not a technical guy. If you want to translate it, you might get a couple of extra FPS, which might be the difference between performing from 55, 58 to 58 to 60 and locking 60. So that's actually pretty important. You're absolutely right. But yeah, they did headline with 12. I think they said 12 to 15%. But if you line all these tools up, the question is, if you line all these tools up, do they make a hell of a difference? And I look, they obviously did, because developers were in a bit of a stare about it, right? But they're just not being used. And that's the problem. Why are they not being used? This is not what we're here to answer, but I thought I would ask the question while we're here. What's your take? What's your take on why you think they're not being used? But before you do, I'll preface this. I have been on record as saying there could be many, many reasons. I haven't set my sights on one specific reason, but it's possible it could be contractual.
Oh, absolutely not having that. Now we're getting confrontational. No, I think most of them are being used more than people realize. Not everything. Like some of them we know, like one that gets talked about quite a lot is various generations of AMD's FSR. We generally know whether that's in there or not because it's had enough buzz about it that people drill into developers to find out if it's there and if it's not, and we know where it is and where it isn't. Variable rate shading, much harder to pick out because it's not very often spoken about. It gets the occasional mention, but it's really, really difficult. And the whole point of these tools is that they're difficult to spot. We're not supposed to be able to see when they're being used and when they're not. But we had Game On Daily, we had, I think, a really, really interesting interview with David Springate near the launch of the consoles, PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series consoles. And he was working for Codemasters Cheshire at the moment. So they had just released Dirt 5 across all of the new gen consoles, all of the old ones, all over the place. But he was head of the tech team there. So when you talk about developers talking about consoles and what they think of them and what they've learned and what they think of the tools and all the rest of it, you have to understand, and I'm not saying this in any kind of derogatory way, but most developers that are working on a game are not digging into the engine to expose the API and see what DirectX is doing or whatever the PlayStation equivalent is doing. You don't develop in that world. People that are making Unreal Engine 5 will develop in that world. People that are building the engines will develop in that world. But most of them work within a tool set and they don't see what's under the hood and they don't need to and they don't want to. So David Springate is not that kind of person. David Springate is the kind of person that goes home and writes his own game engine as a hobbyist activity in the evening and then goes back to work he's at Microsoft now, he's at Playground Games, running a tech team for Fable. But he was writing his own benchmarking tools to see what these consoles could do and all the rest of it. And he said very clearly at the time, he didn't understand why people were saying that tools weren't available on Xbox and why people were saying that there was anything wrong with the SDK that they were using. Because everything that was advertised was there and available to him. He could go and use it. He could go and benchmark it. He could stick it in a game if he wanted to. And
why? Why aren't they sticking it in a game then? That's the point. Like, Where's, I mean, you're saying that it's being used quite often. I mean, if these tools are all used together, giving you, say, 1% advantage gains together, added up, let's say all these, I think there's 5 or 6. So let's say 5 or 6 extra percent in the tool set, right? That should give us enough.
That's 5 or 6, but again, that's a comparison against what? 5 or 6% versus PlayStation toolset that we don't know about. Because
No, but just versus what they've already got. I mean, I think the PlayStation should be able to do, it should also be able to do 1440p. I mean, that's all it does. No, it should also be able to do 1440p, 1440p and a lock 60. I don't see in this generation why we can't get that. And let's be honest, if we're not getting that, we were lied to. There's no way around it. You cannot get around it. And anyone in the chat that gets angry with me saying that, we were lied to. 110%. We were told that we were going to get 8K. We were told we're going to get 4K.
That's definitely like. Let's go through those because lies are interesting. So 8K on the PlayStation 5, but I don't think the Xbox has got that on the box, has it?
No, it doesn't. Just PlayStation.
I don't think they were like that misleading, but the PlayStation literally says it's an 8K 60 device on the box.
Yeah, it says 8K.
You can't even output at 8K resolution, I don't think.
And it says 4K 120. Yeah. No, it can. Oh, no, it can't.
Output at 8K. I've not got an 8K TV, but I thought that was a coming later in firmware feature. And I don't know if it's arrived or not. Obviously, you'd need an 8K TV to expose that option, but I don't think it can actually do that. I think that's a lie.
Didn't they have
for the time being
an 8K game? It was a little.
They had that game that rendered. So there's difference between output and render.
They
had that tourist game that could render at somewhere close to it. It was between 6K and 8K. I can't remember.
Right. Yeah. And Falcon, the Falconeer was rendering at 6K. Right. Yeah. So they can render it. If you can render it, you can output it. Right. That's the outputting. It's really the easy part. The rendering.
Outputting is the easy part. Yeah, but you can output very different numbers to what you can render. That's fine though. What else has been like lied about by either Sony or Microsoft going into this? Well, you can point your finger at it and say that's categorically not true. That's not just a bit misleading. That's a lie. You said a thing and it wasn't true.
Yeah. Well, they've told us we can get 4K 120, and we've seen it once or twice on either console. And that's not the norm. And I think if you advertise a car with air conditioning and you say the car has air conditioning, you don't expect to use it once or twice in the year. You want to be able to use, if you're in Australia, just about every single day of the year, right? So we were lied to. So, or were we?
I got another one.
Go on.
Well, that one, you can put that down as like maybe misleading. There's some truth to it. The boxes can do that. If you give it the right kind of game, it can output what they're saying there. It's not going to very often, but it can technically do it. I'm going to clarify before I do this because people are going to think that I'm here to bully like Xbox and everything that they've said, and that's really not the case. Like between the two, I fully expect the Xbox to outperform the PlayStation 5. I like the design of it, and there's loads of great things going on in that box. Loads of great things that Microsoft have done around that box. But one thing that they did that wasn't so great was chief engineer Andrew Goosen said in an interview that ray tracing was essentially free on the Xbox, that it's a 12 teraflop console, but it's got dedicated ray tracing hardware. And if you use that in tandem, you can just throw around ray tracing effects and you've got essentially a 25 teraflop console.
He did make it seem like he did make it seem like that, but I don't think he specifically said that it.
Oh, we did.
Did he?
He did. He specifically said it runs completely independently, and you can just you can run your 12 teraflops for rasterization, and then run your ray tracing on top of it. And that we have and this isn't obviously PlayStation isn't doing anything wildly different in the ray tracing department, but neither of these consoles is good at ray tracing, and neither of them gives us ray tracing for free.
No, definitely doesn't. But look, this bits some really good examples of ray tracing, lock 60, and a decent resolution. And the Miles Morales DLC is one of them.
Messy.
I like to get messy. I just like to have a laugh. This is what it's all about. But I do have a question from the chat. Very interesting question. What else? But before we do move on to that question, what else have we lied about? I mean, look, if it's possible that it can do this, right? Well, I haven't changed that. If it's possible that we can do this, or the consoles can do, or both of them can do it. We've seen it in both of them. We've seen 120 4K, I think, in both consoles. Why isn't it doing it? Why aren't they aiming for that? What the hell happened with Gotham Knights? I mean, they leaned on the CPU heavily there. But and they weren't even using all of the CPU. So I think that CPU they were benchmarked or testing it at 8 cores, and it was only 4 of the cores that were using 70%, and the rest of the cores were using like up to 20%. That's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, Gotham Knights is one game that was particularly messy. Like, it started off as a cross-gen game. They couldn't get it working as a cross-gen game, but they kept a lot of that legacy in there. They kept a lot of that. But developing for the previous gen consoles in there, and they made some bad decisions. Like Gotham Knights, I don't think is worth a big talk about, but they put all that emphasis on co-op, and the co-op mode wasn't even good. They implied that there was all sorts of things going on in the city, and there really wasn't. I just think they made some bad decisions early on and got stuck with them.
Yeah, but it does definitely give you pause, and you could think about it. The tools are there, as you said. They're just not being used. And is it the developers that's the problem here? Are we at the? And look, this happens at the beginning of
conspiracy. Go on.
This happens at the beginning of every generation. Like, we've seen this many times. With the start, even going back to the 360 generation, and those consoles, well, not the PS3, but those consoles were obviously, and the games were a lot easier to put together. There was a lot less moving parts. They were much simpler. So they were a lot easier to put together, which is why they developed in 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, and we got so many through that generation. But however, towards the end of the generation, we really started to get games that pushed towards the next gen, which was, Xbox One and PS4. And they started to really look the goods. And as we went into PS4, same thing again. We had poor performance. And there was a focus on performance at the beginning of the generation. And then we had poor resolution, especially on the Xbox One. So maybe, this could just be teething, right? Are we past the point of teething, though? We're 2 years in, 2.5. Are we 2.5? No, we're not even 2.5. We're 2 years in, just over 2 years in. This is teething problems, surely.
Different to the previous ones. There was a lot more foresight in this generation ahead of this generation. So going into the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 generation, they had planned for this one ahead and the next one, with their moving over to their more common, easy architecture. In theory, the transition from PlayStation 4 and Xbox One over to this current generation that we've got now should have been way smoother than anything we've ever seen before, in terms of development and in terms of like getting some of the potential out of these consoles. Because if you go back to the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, those were both weird as fuck. Nobody had developed for anything like them before. So for those consoles, all of the tools were a mess. All of the development engines were a mess, and they were all figuring it out as they went along, particularly how to make an engine run on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, because they were wildly different. That stopped being true with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. They became different grades of AMD hardware, and they are still different grades of AMD hardware today. So the transition should have been smoother. What we haven't seen at all, though, is many games that aren't developed cross-platform. And I like both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series console. So S and X, I think they are both fantastic and exciting bits of hardware in terms of what they can do to push gaming forwards. I did not like the Xbox One, and I did not like the PlayStation 4, because they had potato processors that were going to hold back everything for a long time. We're at a point now where those consoles, those potatoes, are still holding everything back, because most of the games that come out are cross-generation games. So fundamentally, like, you can scale your resolution, you can throw in some new lighting, you can add some detail and some textures and some ray tracing and all the rest of it, but you can't scale the fundamentals of a game.
No,
if your core gameplay is dependent on like physics and AI, it's got to work on a potato.
That's
and
CPU.
We've had 2 years, and it's too long. Yeah, exactly. We've had 2 years, which is too long for people that have bought this hardware of cross-gen stuff. And we are going to move into that. It's going to change over the next year or so, and we should see some stuff that's like, "Whoa, I've not played a game like this before."
Are you saying
what everyone wants?
Are you saying leave those people who haven't bought the new gen behind?
Well, no, Microsoft aren't doing that, are they, Riskit? They've got a fantastic plan to cloud stream to people with the older hardware to make that generational change even smoother. But on the PlayStation side, I really don't think that it's right to say that every game should be next gen only, because not every game needs to push boundaries in that way. But if the scope and scale of the game, if the ambition of the developer is to make something that you can't make on the previous generation, then yeah, those people are going to miss out. It's just the way it has to be.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, and I would say even on the PlayStation, I think if they want to step forward, And then coming into 2023, if 2023 ends up being what we think it will be, and not a 2022, PlayStation probably needs to step forward with the "We Believe in Generations." We do have a question from the chat, and it's from Punty. Welcome to the show, Punty, absolute champion. Appreciate you coming along and supporting us. He says, do either of you think Xbox will have a mid-gen refresh? And if so, does PlayStation have the glut of funding to be... I don't know what a glut is.
A large amount.
Enough. Oh, right. The glut of funding. Is that English?
For sure.
Okay, it is. You say glut.
Yeah.
How much have you got?
Yeah.
I've got a glut. So does
glut of wine. Here we go.
Does PlayStation have the glut of funding to beat out Xbox on the specs? Well, this is an interesting one, right? So first of all, I'm definitely going to have, and I'll go. I definitely want to ask you what you think, if you think that, because I do, and I'm definitely going to have Pete's knees on my wall. If you don't know Jedi Pete, that's he's on Xbox Infinite Saturdays, Fridays, depending on which day or which country you're on. Anyway, moving on. I do think they'll have one, and this is the reason that I think we'll have one, is because PlayStation doesn't not like having the power narrative. However, Tillman's eating potato salad right now. I don't think PlayStation like being behind. And I think they know they are behind. I mean, look at the teraflops. If you look at raw power on paper, we've had this. We're going to have this conversation too. I think PlayStation don't like to even look that way on paper. And I think that they will mid-gen refresh. And because I think they will mid-gen refresh, and I really don't think the Xbox has to, I think it's in a unique position where it doesn't have to. However, it's money on the table.
Shaders.
No, because of the cloud. No, 110% because of the cloud. Because I think that they can push the tech in the cloud. I don't think we're there to the point where you're not going to need a new console and we're just going to sit on the Xbox One VCR for the next 20 years and the cloud's going to drive us forward. But I do think that we're in a position where they can, they could bring in AI, they could bring in textures, anything. I mean, look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. That streams in textures. So that's pretty cool. We're kind of seeing that tech now. However, Phil Spencer did say, and Phil Spencer has said a lot of things over the years. Love you, Phil. He did say that they will never be behind in the power narrative again. That was his words. He didn't want to be behind the power narrative, and Xbox will never be behind in the power narrative. And that was the original mandate of the original Xbox. Their thing was to be more powerful than their competition, which I believe was the PlayStation 2. And so I just think Xbox will go, right, if they're going to make a console, we're going to wait. And I think you'll see, oh God, this could be another one. I think you'll see that Xbox comes out with their mid-gen refresh after, maybe not long after, but after PlayStation does their mid-gen refresh. And I think that'll happen. What do you think?
I don't think so, but it's hard to be sure. I don't think PlayStation are too bothered about the power narrative. I think they've navigated that one just fine so far. The reason that I don't think there is a Pro coming out is because the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X were driven by very specific reasons. It's a little bit more complicated on the Xbox side because they did have an Xbox One to rectify, so they did have to reclaim certain narratives. But on the PlayStation side, it was very simple. They had a 1080p box, and everyone was buying 4K TVs. Mm-hmm. So the PlayStation 4 Pro, I think, was a misstep on their part. I don't think it was a very...
Oop, you've dropped out. We've lost your sound. Lost your sound. If you guys can hear Acer in the chat, throw a tomato. If you can't hear him, throw a thumbs up. Well, that's backwards, isn't it? I have lost your sound. I don't know if it's my side or your side. Yep, no, it's definitely Discord. You might have to drop out, drop back in. Technical difficulties. We'll be right back.
let's just carry on smoothly like nothing went wrong, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So PlayStation 4 Pro, I didn't like as a release, but Sony released it very specifically to take advantage of the TVs that people had. Stop looking confused, fix your stuff. You're a little bit like PlayStation frames per second. Move it off.
We're all good. We're all good. Continue
We're all
on,
good,
sir.
we're all good.
Continue on.
Punty can't hear me. Oh, you are missing out. I said the best stuff.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah, so the PlayStation 4 Pro was driven by display technology. In the current generation of consoles, the only thing that you can that I can really think of that would drive the need for an upgrade would be like ray tracing, and AMD are not making great strides in that space. So I just don't see a massive need. I do think Xbox's initial plan, much as Jim Ryan believes in generations, I think Xbox's plan was a more frequent cadence of hardware, because they've got their ecosystem in shape so that they can release different versions of consoles and people can take advantage of the latest hardware. So I think they're well placed to do that. I don't think we're going to get a set of consoles with the Pro moniker or anything like that, though. We'll see.
Well, I think it just takes one to step forward.
You're right there. If one does, then the other will follow suit.
Mm-hmm. And the other
very similar time frame.
The other reason that I think it will is purely because of PlayStation's history of look. It seems like I'm blaming PlayStation, but I don't see a reason for Xbox to do it. And so I see the only reasons that I can see for PlayStation to do it is obviously the power narrative, because otherwise they don't have a reason to. And the other thing would be money. They would have made an absolute ton of money off that hardware. In the end, they don't make money off hardware normally. Yes, absolutely. But they would have made it. Go ahead. Go on.
I just realized I haven't actually directly addressed Punty's question yet, though. So just because he asked if PlayStation would be able to make a more powerful console if they could afford to do that. And Punty, that's not really a matter of money. They can make a more powerful console. At the end of the day, that cost gets passed on to us as the people buying the console. It doesn't cost them more to go to AMD and say, give us a bigger chip, give us better hardware. But it will cost us more. And Sony are very conscious of how much their console costs when it goes out.
Yeah, so, especially after the PlayStation 3 era and that slight misstep. But you would think they would kind of learn from that. It doesn't seem like they have, charging an extra $50 in my country, your country, and maybe not Punty's country if he's from, well, he must be from the UK if you use, what is it, Glomp?
He said, well, I say glut, but some people might say it differently. He said it was Canadian English, so...
Oh, right. Okay. Well, they're getting charged more as well. Everywhere around
we use it here.
Everywhere around the world's getting charged more. And you would think after PS3 that misstep would have been corrected, but it obviously hasn't. So you definitely don't. So you didn't really give a definitive answer. And I know you don't like to. You like to slightly dance around definitive answers on things. But definitively, do you think that we will have a mid-gen refresh?
I don't put any stock in my answer, but no, I don't. I don't think so.
You definitely don't think that we'll have one. There's no reason.
Well, that's a lot more definite than these are not my words. If I have to pick an answer, I don't think we'll see one.
Okay, so a lot of people would cite the fact that they don't have full RDNA2, and that's the reason why you would see a mid-gen refresh.
to get the mesh shaders.
To get mesh shaders, that's right. And GDKs and tools, and what are we missing out of the tool set though? What are we actually missing?
That's back to what we didn't get into earlier, isn't it? Like, why aren't the games performing to the standards, the lofty standards that we've set for them?
Well,
that's not performing to the standard you expect.
That's a little bit slightly misleading. Objection, Your Honor.
That's why I want you to clarify, set some context. What is it? What is it we're looking at?
So what's not being used?
Why are we sad gamers? What's going on?
And it wasn't us that set the expectation. It was both of the marketing teams at Xbox and PlayStation that set these expectations. However, there's also in that's slightly nuanced, because there's also expectations that comes from you guys, from the PC side of things, that you guys are like, oh, that dirty console that just can't do ray tracing and all that sort of stuff. So there is a slight a bit of a bar that that consoles know they need to hit per generation. But however, by the time that these consoles were released, they were already out of date. So, I mean, I don't think that
less so than the previous ones. Less so than, like, they're out of date in that NVIDIA are way ahead of AMD. And that's a bit of a shame that both consoles are on the AMD side. But they're not out of date in the way that the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 were. But they released, like, 2 generations behind the PC equivalents.
Right. So what are we not seeing from RDNA? We didn't answer this question. So I am looking up the architecture now.
Yeah, and it's not, like I say, this is my thing. I don't put much stock in this. The whole RDNA2 conversation, I don't think has been particularly helpful. It's one of those things, it's this generation's misguided marketing term. Last generation, we had 4K, was a marketing term that did more harm than good. Particularly as we go forwards, the native resolution is less and less important, and people are still caught on that. And it's a shame. Do
you want to know what it says for RDNA2? What the features are?
Go for it.
Literally says compute units, ray tracing, and AMD Infinity Cache. The Xbox does not have the AMD Infinity Cache. It has a Velocity architecture.
Does the PS5. Neither of them have Infinity Cache.
Yeah.
Most of the GPUs on the PC side don't. That's more of a commercial feature. That's for data centers and things more so than home devices. Right.
And ray tracing. Well, compute units. I mean, obviously they have compute units. Every piece of hardware has compute units. So I find it interesting that they put in compute units with absolutely no sort of description as to what that means or why you need compute units or even what they are. But good on you, AMD. Thank you for just adding something in with a tick. You always want as many ticks as you can get. It does have compute units, so it's not a lie. So marketing would say, definitely put that in. So basically what we're talking about here is ray tracing. That's what we're talking about with RDNA2, right? Because if you think about mesh shaders is actually a DirectX 12 feature. It's not really to do with RDNA2.
This is where I feel that Microsoft got fairly misleading because they definitely twisted marketing terms in their favor around everything direct. It's not just DirectX, but the whole direct library is literally Microsoft's labeling for their libraries. So they're like, we're the only ones with hardware that does direct stuff. Of course you are. It's your stuff.
We're the only one with DirectX 12. It's our proprietary stuff. But if we look forward to RDNA 3, we see AI acceleration. So what does that mean? That the AI gets smarter?
That's their attempts. No, that's DLSS on the NVIDIA side. So NVIDIA have Tensor cores. They've got dedicated hardware for AI acceleration, which AMD have been lacking. The main use that gaming people are familiar with is upscaling. Basically, it's the DLSS stuff. It's also really useful in the PC side for like rendering and things. There's lots of little AI tools you can do to make things easier within DaVinci Resolve and stuff like that. In the console space, it's something that Microsoft, and this is an advantage that we haven't seen leveraged yet. Nobody knows quite how good the Xbox is at it, but Microsoft do claim that they've got some AI acceleration in there. And that is a feature that, as far as I'm aware, we haven't seen used.
Is that linked with machine learning? Because they also, that was DirectX 12. So yeah, that's, again, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen any of the DirectX 12 tool set. We haven't really seen anything from RDNA 2. No one can really tell us what that actually is. But I also add that they have a chiplet design. I'm pretty sure that RDNA 2 had chiplet design also.
RDNA 3 is chiplet.
Yeah. So what's the difference? What's that? Chiplet design.
So this is not in either console. This is again like way into current gen PC stuff. It's essentially, the way that processors have cores.
Yeah.
It's trying to do the same thing in the graphics card space. So rather than have it all on like a single die, you're starting to get cores on the graphics card, and it's something that AMD have been talking about for a very long time, and now they're making real.
Right.
And it will be Ghost Door.
Right. So what you're saying is when we move to RDNA 3.
No, what I'm saying is fear for your life. Your door just swung open.
Oh, did it? Oh my God. Oh.
Don't actually fear for your life.
Here. Get out of here.
That's not a ghost, it's a dog.
Excuse my dog. So chiplet design won't be available for Xbox on RDNA 3. Radiant's display engine, that won't be available for Xbox. And we apparently have AI acceleration. So what we're talking about when we talk about RDNA 2 and the possibilities that it has, and then if we move to RDNA 3, not very exciting for the consoles because really all we're getting is what we have. that's not being used, right? So why isn't it being used? We still haven't answered that question. I don't think, can anyone actually answer that question? Is it possible?
I think so. I think the more pertinent question that people will want you to answer, Riskit, because you're here as our tech guru, so an answer from you. Ignoring all of the marketing terms, ignoring RDNA2 special features that one console has and one doesn't, and all the rest of it. Looking at it, it's most basic. They're AMD hardware, bought from the same store. Xbox is 12 teraflops, and PlayStation 5 is like 10 or whatever.
10. Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing that reflected in every game that comes out? That's the question that people are going to be looking for an answer to, I think.
Yeah, but
why aren't we?
But we do. And that is
every game that comes out.
Not in every game that comes out. And the answer to that,
close.
The answer to that is really, really simple. When you're talking like 2 teraflops worth of like distance overhead, the answer to that is very, very simple. It's look, and some people stood on a hill and shouted from the rooftops when Callisto Protocol came out that why wasn't it running on Xbox as good as it was running on PlayStation? It's a really simple answer. That's the developers.
Don't say it.
They know who butter. Okay. They know who butter their bread. And I forget the name of the studio. Striking Distance. Were having their bread buttered by PlayStation, like 110%. They didn't.
That's
they didn't.
One example. What about CD Projekt Red?
Hang on, that's one example. I'll finish with the example. So when you send and I'm not saying that those developers, and a lot of people were saying this, and it's just absolute nuts. Don't say this. Don't say that like the developers went over there and were like, we're destroying the Xbox version. That wasn't happening. What was happening was that they were focusing on one version. They were focusing on the PlayStation 5 version, and as they should, PlayStation put money into their game. That's what you would do as a business. That's just a standard thing that you would do as a business. You wouldn't, like if you are a baker and someone pays you $500 for 10 loaves of bread, and then someone pays you $400 for 10 loaves of bread, and you're not going to be able to cook 20 loaves, you're only going to be able to cook 15. Who's going to get the 10 loaves? The guy that pays you 500. That's just how it works. The guy who pays the most gets the best deal, right? And so there's an example there. It was an interesting hill for some people to stand on and question the tools because it just really wasn't relatable to those games. And also, what's another game that we've had issues with?
Warzone 2, CD Projekt Red, Witcher 3, Need for Speed, quite a few to the tail end of this year.
Right, yeah, the tail end of this year. But before that, what we've seen is a power narrative where, and I'll also ask the question.
Before that has been up and down.
Well, before that, we've seen higher resolution on the Xbox.
We have sometimes, yes.
Yeah, I would argue for the most part, and then a lower. I feel like you're going to argue that when we come back to you. For the most part, I think we've seen higher resolution and roughly about the same frames. I think on performance-wise, I think they're pretty on par. But we do see often the Xbox lead out with graphically, and that's really only because it has a couple extra teraflops. That's where those teraflops are, I believe, in the GPU, or because they have very similar CPU, even though the PS5 clock's higher. It can take up some more of the load off the GPU in the PS5, and I think that's kind of how they're managing it, or how it seems to be that they're managing it. So, I think we have seen it. I really think we have. I don't think we're going to see much more of unless we start using the tools, I don't think we're going to see much more of a lead with 2 teraflops. I don't think teraflop, and it's not just the teraflop, it's how you use it. It's how everything talks to each other. So you might have a GPU that's like a 4090, and then the other console has a GPU that's a 3090 or whatever the hell it is. I don't know PC stuff. But that GPU is further away. The 4090 is further away from the CPU. And so to talk to each other, it's much more difficult, and things get bunched up in a part, whatever. And the 3090 is closer, so it talks. It all depends. It's not just dependent on teraflops either. But I think it's mostly development teams. I think it's mostly development teams that focus on one console or another. They at the moment have 2, 3, 4. There's 7 consoles to develop for. There's 7 different configurations to develop for, plus PC. And as you said, it's not all scalable, right? Or is it?
Certain things being. So I'm gonna go for that question as well, because it is a difficult one, and neither of us are making a game, especially not. I dick around in some game engines, but I'm not looking under the hood and figuring this stuff out to the extent that a David Springate or somebody else would. I think the teraflops, the difference in teraflops between the two consoles is meaningful, more so than any talk of RDNA2 and mesh shaders and all the rest of these things. The difference in teraflops is essentially pretty much the difference between the consoles in terms of how they should perform graphically. We've seen it through the year sometimes. There have been games where the Xbox version is basically the PlayStation version with more pixels to the extent that you would expect, performing about the same. Part of it is, like you say, development. So when I was saying earlier that the vast majority of a team developing a game are not looking under the hood, they're working within tools that have been provided. They're making a game per those tools. They're not even the team that are going to be profiling performance. So there are a lot of advantages to making a game that works on both consoles, and you don't necessarily take advantage of the overhead when you're doing that. If you've got Unreal Engine 5 as your tool set for your game, and you're using the features that are in it, you're going to make it the way you want it and find that it runs okay on both. And that's fine. There's no reason to push one further than the other in that situation. So some of these games, it is the case that they just made what they want and it works. So then you don't see any advantage. The other one, though, I've forgotten because I lost my train of thought entirely. You did mention there, you said the PlayStation 5 had a faster clock CPU. It doesn't. It's ever so slightly slower, but that's not like a material difference. They are basically the same. The thing that concerns me for, like, on the Xbox side, when people do see problems, when you do see the frame rate not quite keeping up with the PlayStation 5 and things like that, the thing that concerns me is that I'm not sure that DirectX 12 is a very good API. And I say this through experience on the PC side of things, and then kind of seeing it like borne out on the Xbox side of things. I don't think that DirectX is quite as good as the API that Sony are using, because Sony's API is laser focused on the hardware in the PlayStation 5, and DirectX 12 is there for the Xbox One and the One X and the One S and the One and the Series X and all of the PCs besides that. And there are versions of it that are tailored to the Xbox consoles, but I don't think they're as refined and streamlined as Sony's API is.
Or as they should be.
Will they get better going forwards, or are we going to have, like, is the kind of tone of the generation set and going to carry on for the next 2 or 3 years?
Right. So I mean,
I don't know.
If you're saying the PS5, I was under the impression that the PS5 was actually clocked at a higher speed. I know it's overclocked. So you're saying that the actual?
I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong on this because they're just numbers that I forget. I'm pretty sure the Series S is 3.4 gigahertz. PlayStation 1 is 3.5, but it's variable and can go lower depending on where they're using their smart shift. And the Series X is 3.6 locked. I could have that wrong, though.
The Series X is 3.8 gigahertz. The PlayStation is 3.5. Right, so the actual Xbox...
I've got the order right, but not the numbers. But
yeah. So the actual... So the PlayStation is actually clocked lower, but it's overclocked, right? So that means that its chipset is...
No Riskit.
No.
It's not overclocked.
Right. Where did that narrative come?
Definition of the word, I don't know. Some silly people. Some silly people spread that one and said it was overclocked. It's a strange word because overclocked, like by its very nature, it means you've taken something like released products and you've pushed it further than its reference clocks. A PlayStation 5 has its reference clocks. Nobody's pushed them higher than that. You can't. It's a PlayStation. So there's a theory that based on some like early benchmarking that came out for the PlayStation, that they perhaps intended to have a lower clock at some point in time. But this is another one of those things I don't buy into. It's a handy narrative that people like to spin. I think 2 years into this generation, it's fairly safe to say that PlayStation 5s aren't all catching fire. It might be slightly more examples of problems than on the Xbox, but
yeah, but they do run hot. They do run hotter. That's been we've seen that.
They do, but that's not overclocking. That's high. That's just it's clocked higher. It runs faster. Sony have made it, but they've also gone into it from the outset with a ridiculously elaborate cooling system, and that's just the console that they wanted to release. Overclocking is an aftermarket thing. That's what the word is used for. So for the whole narrative to go around that Sony have overclocked it was to sow like it's FUD, because the connotation is that it's not going to work. It's going to burn out.
Right, yeah.
That was never the case. It's not overclocked.
I never thought that I didn't ever see it as a connotation of it burning out. That was never. But when I do look at the,
it's what PC gamers do when they're going to tinker at the risk and detriment of their own hardware.
And do you do
So I
that?
was trying to convince
with your
people that
VR?
if you buy a PlayStation 5, it might explode. It's overclocked.
Well, I mean, you did say
It's
it was
not designed
elaborate.
to run that fast. It might melt.
When I look at the
No.
PS5, I do think elaborate. So if there's an elaborate
Freaking
cooling
ugly console. It's,
if there's an elaborate cooling system inside that thing, I'm certainly not surprised. Well, look, I don't think we can answer the question, right? Why?
Of course we can't. Of course we can't.
Why? But the why, I do believe, is in developers' hands. The why, I do believe, is in Engine's hands. I mean, if you look at, do you remember that couple of weeks ago we had that the narrative of, oh my God, everything's going to run at 30.
I do.
Yeah. And everyone was like, "Oh, that's it. No, Unreal 5 can't. It's too powerful for the Xbox. It's too powerful for the PlayStation. It's just not going to be able to do 60. We're going to have to accept 30." And there was some actual real worry. I think until Digital Foundry pulled out their tool set and had a look at what was going on behind the hood with Gotham Knights, and what was the other one? Playstyle.
Not just that. It was Epic came out and kind of proved everyone wrong on that narrative, because they
5.1.
released their update for Fortnite that had Lumen and all the rest of it running at 60, saying you can have all of these effects. This is Unreal Engine 5. Everybody knows, well, Unreal Engine 5.1. Everybody knows that this engine is probably going to define what console games look like for this generation once it's established. Here you go. And this is the good news for Xbox fans is, it does run better on Xbox. Not because of the tools and the RDNA2. It runs better proportionally to the bigger chip that it's got.
Yeah, which again makes sense. But you don't. So I just wanted to get your. So you don't think we've seen a lead from Xbox?
No, I do absolutely acknowledge that we've seen. The thing is, it depends who you listen to, but there's been an expectation that the lead would push beyond the teraflop numbers, right? And I don't think we've seen it push beyond that basic number. A lot of people would dismiss that because there's been times in the past where people have used teraflops to mean more than they do. Because you look at teraflops of an NVIDIA card versus an AMD card, and that's an almost meaningless number. Mm-hmm. But you look at it within AMD's family of cards, it's not a meaningless number. It's actually pretty representative of what the consoles can do. You can definitely read too much into it, because there is more to it. They've got their different fill rates and bandwidths and all the rest of it. But the teraflops is a meaningful number. And the performance differential that we've seen pretty much for most of 2022, it kind of fell off the boat a bit at the tail end, but most of 2022 has been that the Xbox has been like 20% ahead on resolution. And that's exactly what on paper it should be.
So this brings us to the logical question of, have we reached our peak with these consoles?
Of course not. Started. But that's, like we said earlier about the cross-generation, the stuff that's most interesting about these consoles is definitely not the resolutions that they can put out. Stuff that's exciting about these consoles, and I say this as I play on the PC a lot. I've got a nice PC and I use it probably more often than consoles. I use both consoles, but the PC gaming experience is also dictated by what is available on the consoles. A multi-platform game on a PC is a console game scaled in certain areas, but fundamentally the important, fun, exciting parts of a game are determined by the lowest common denominator. What a game can be is going to be determined by the Xbox Series S.
Ooh.
And that is... No, see, you're saying, because people like to throw that around as a negative. For me, that's a massive, massive positive.
Are you saying that games...
not like the Xbox One.
I did
not like the PlayStation 4. They had potato processors.
Are you saying games are potato-driven?
Fantastic processor.
Yes.
It's like, you got the clock speed. It's like 3.4 gigahertz or whatever. That's a tiny part of the tail relative to the old consoles. So they were 1.6, 1.8 or something. And that doesn't tell the whole story, because this is a much, much newer generation. It's like orders of magnitude more powerful than the processor in the previous consoles. You've got these solid state drives in both of them. And I'm not giving a massive lead to PlayStation on this one, because they've both got solid state drives that perform fantastically well. These are the things that are going to define what games can do across the board, across consoles and PC.
Are you saying that magical SSDs are going to give us better AI?
I am not saying anything so silly. But the processors in these things, yes, they should give us better AI.
And that's what that is. I did see your game on Daily. I don't think it was the week just gone, but the week before, you guys were talking about what really is exciting. And Gaz did put up a really good video. Again, check that out. Link in the description to the channel. Head down there and check that out. And if you want to see Acer like murder Elder Scrolls, people, dragons, monsters, whatever, on the treadmill, It's a good laugh. Ready Player One. That's what you should change the channel. Then Ready Player One. Anyway, going back to what we were saying, I've lost my train of thought. That's what you guys were talking about. You're talking about the AI, and that is something that I have kind of been waiting. I think everyone's been waiting to see, and I 110% agree with you. Where we should be pushing these consoles. To me, 1440p, I would be happy with 1440p 60. And if you give me something that's different in a game, mechanically, AI based. Just something that brings this forward, because there's a lot of conversation about what is next gen. What are we going to see with next gen? And I think it's more than graphics. And
I'm rudely interrupting you. I want you to take one thing away from all of this. Stop talking about resolution. That's my gift to you. Don't worry about 1440p. Don't worry about 4K. Forget those numbers completely. No. You'd be doing yourself a favor.
Well, otherwise we're going to end up at 720p. There's a limit. We have to hold these developers accountable.
But no, because you don't have to hold them accountable on native resolution. If they were to do a native resolution of 720p, and I'm not suggesting that they do this, but if they were to do that and the final image quality in front of you was reconstructed by AI and had all of these fancy tools and tricks and looked pristine, that'll be fine. Who cares what the native resolution is?
Oh yeah, I don't care about native.
And you can't put a number to it. So don't ask for 1440p. Don't ask for 4K. Forget those numbers exist and look at what things actually look like.
But how do you quantify that?
Why do you need to quantify that?
Well, you need to quantify. How do you explain that?
Do you need to quantify it unless, like, if you want to have a little PlayStation versus Xbox argument, then maybe you need some numbers to quantify things. But if you want to enjoy some games,
but see, I never have those arguments.
Quantify it. You're not.
No, but I mean, how do you quantify it? You'd be like, what's it look like? It looks really good. Like, what's the resolution? Really good.
It's going to get taken away from you. That argument is going to get taken away anyway, because it's going to get to a point where people don't know what the native resolution is, and it's not going to be the same at the edge of the screen as it is in the middle, and it's just going to be
and as I get older,
curve, drop the resolution. As
I get older and I see worse, the resolution is not going to be so important. Everything would be at 720p, even real life. Until I get glasses. But I mean, it's a great example of that is Guardians of the Galaxy. Everyone balked at that, and that game was absolutely stunningly beautiful. So I could see what you're saying there. But I want to bring it back to the original topic. If I can remember what that is, it's another thing about being old, is that you completely lose. Well, you're talking about, because I had a point that I was heading towards, and now I don't know where it is. So maybe this might be a good point to end the show.
Can. If we're doing that, I need to remind everyone that I don't know anything. Riskit doesn't know anything. Right? Respectfully, none of us are digging in under the hood, looking at these tool sets, looking at these consoles, making things tick and making things work. So take everything that we say as complete nonsense. Go and enjoy your games, especially Riskit. Doubly nonsense if he said it. That's
the last question I wanted to ask you, actually. So if we haven't hit the peak, then you would be absolutely right. There's no need for a mid-gen console refresh, right? If we're definitely not at the peak in 2 years, and we go, say, get 5 years down the track, we hit our peak, right? Is it then time? Is it then time to have a longer console generation with a slight mid-gen refresh, or do we move into new consoles? What do we do? We
have not hit the peak of the Sega Dreamcast. It's not unattainable. It's not an attainable thing.
I also want to add,
techniques and tools and skills will always be getting better.
I also want to add,
there is no peak to reach.
Some people were very upset about the Game Awards and the lack of Xboxes showing. We're not going to go into that. We're going to end the show in any minute now. But I wanted to add and just leave everyone with some thoughts before I outro Asa. Atari didn't turn up either. Asa, it's been absolutely fantastic.
It's a thought, I suppose.
It's been absolutely amazing to have you on the show and just have a chat about gaming and the state of the tools and what's going on. And I 110% agree with Asa. I'm not a tech man. We watch, we listen, we learn, but we don't know everything. And in some cases, we don't know anything. But it's good. It's an interesting conversation to have. And I look forward to seeing this generation really pick up in the way that you pointed out for AI. Not even graphically. I just like to see AI mechanically, some new mechanics introduced, something different that we haven't seen before. So it was a really great conversation to have, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and giving me your time. I know it's late. I don't want to get you out of here. but please let the people know where they can find you, what you'll be up to, and what you're playing next on the channel, because I'd be very interested to see that. Oh, before you do, if you want to find Asa or Game On Daily, the links are down in the description. Head down there, click that, and click the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already. Asa?
Yes, do that. While you're here, make sure you've hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and find me on, I'm obviously on the Game On Daily channel. We do go live every Saturday. Some other stuff coming up on that channel in the near future. So if you're not already there, then please do get along. If you want my less welcomed takes and my VR gameplay and all the rest of it, then I've got my own little channel where I have loads of fun and get right deep into my interests. So every Thursday I talk for like a good 2 hours, pretty much by myself. I've got a guest on my show this week, but I do a Q&A show on a Thursday where we get into whatever people want to ask.
Who's the guest? Who's the guest? Tell the people who the guest is.
This week is a festive surprise, so I can't. It'll be ruining things. I've not announced it yet. It's just a friend. We're just having a nice friendly chat while the news is low. And we have a nice little turnout on that. People come along and ask lots of questions, and we get deep into all kinds of nonsense. I also do my streaming there, including my VR. Today, I killed a dragon and I threw its skeleton onto a village. It's fun. Yeah, that's me. That's me. Thanks, everyone.
It is. It is 110% fun. It's a laugh. He really does get into it, especially in Elder Scrolls. I do get a chance to usually watch after the fact because he's usually in bed when I'm waking up. So speaking of that, it's been a fantastic show. Everyone in the chat, you guys have been absolutely amazing. It is hard to respond and get to you guys when it's just me managing, talking with one person, but I'll get better at it as we go along. Thanks for coming along, guys, watching. Give us your time. Please like button, subscribe.